live long and prosper. So in this video series, I'm going to be talking through the social justice elements of every episode of the original series of Star Trek. The thing that inspired this project was actually a Fox News article which argued that Star Trek has in some way betrayed its traditional commitment to sort of political neutrality or middle ground by embracing progressive politics. In this series, we're going to see that Star Trek has always embraced progressive politics, and it's always been aspirational for social justice in various senses. I am taking a broad perspective on social justice here, so that may include multiple different types of social justice, whether that's racial, whether that's economic, whether that's religious, whether that's abilities, gender and sexuality, anything broadly considered. I will go through every episode. Some of the episodes I will interview fellow Trekkies and talk with them about it. And then below, in the descriptions, I will give you additional information about the episodes, particularly their original air date, who wrote the screenplay, and who directed that episode. I also want to dedicate this series to my dad, Michael Allen Zapkin. He was an OG Trekkie from back in the day, and it was watching the original series with him that I came to love Star Trek. In this video, we're talking about Spock's brain. First episode of Season 3, baby! Yeah, it's actually a terrible episode. Spock's brain, it's not as bad as something like the Immunity Syndrome, but boy howdy is it up there for bad episodes. So the Enterprise is, chugging along. A ship, an ion propulsion-driven ship shows up. And Scotty's like, oh, ion power, that's amazing. Or, oh, ion power, that's amazing. And then a woman basically not even beams on board, just appears on the bridge. She presses a button on her wrist device, and everybody in the crew is like, oh, no, I'm unconscious. When they awake, Spock's body is on the operating table in sickbay, and the brain is gone. Brain ain't there. McCoy's like, I don't know how the fuck this happened, because this is some crazy shit. Nobody can do this. But Spock apparently, as a Vulcan, can live for a while without his brain. But only 24 hours from the time that McCoy found him, apparently. Not entirely clear where that figure comes from. It seems to be a sort of arbitrary guess on McCoy's part, but then later Spock confirms that, and I'll tell you how he can do that. So Spock's brain is gone. They've got 24 hours to find it and surgically restore it, which also McCoy doesn't know how to do, but Kirk reasons the woman who was on the ship took the brain, she could put it back. Luma is her name, by the way. So they follow the ion trail from this ship's propulsion, and they eventually do manage to find the planet. There's they find the star system in which this planet is. There's 3 potential contenders. Kirk sort of goes with his gut, / reads a signal that's... and so they eventually actually find this... It's an Ice Age type planet, like cave people, cavemen specifically, living up on the surface. But they find that down below the surface, there's an advanced technological area populated primarily by women, but also by men who have pain harnesses around their waists to basically sort of force them into servitude. The problem that they encounter is that everybody on this planet has a childlike mind. Not childlike in the sense of, oh, that's wonderful, I'm curious and learning, but childlike in the sense of they know jack shit. This is clearly not a people that could build the underground civilization they're living in, not a people that could develop ion propulsion, not a people that could successfully remove Spock's brain. So there's that mystery. What they do manage to figure out, because they pick up Spock's thoughts on the communicator, and what they figure out is that Spock is existing as a disembodied brain who's actually running the complex that they're in. And his physiological or psychological sense of having a physical body is rooted in things like circulating air, generating heat, all of these kinds of things. So his brain is keeping this complex running. The way that Luma had been able to perform advanced brain surgery on Spock was through a device called the Teacher. And basically this is sort of helmet with neural circuits or something like that she puts on, and it imparts knowledge into her brain. She is understandably quite reluctant to let Kirk and McCoy, and Scotty, who's there as well, take back Spock's brain, which would effectively destroy their civilization, because there would be no central controller to run the underground complex that keeps them alive. But McCoy says, I'll put on the Teacher, and then I can use my existing surgery skills plus the knowledge, and I can put Spock's brain back in. Things initially are going swimmingly. McCoy's like, haha, I've got all the medical knowledge now. And then he's like, I'm doing surgery super fast. Oh. And then he starts to be like, now I don't really remember what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I guess Kirk instructs him to hook up Spock's mouth. This is not how the brain works, incidentally. Like, I don't know from science, but I'm reasonably certain that you can't just be like, okay, I've connected these nerves. Now Spock's mouth is going to work and he can form coherent sentences. Well, basically they get through brain surgery by McCoy just sort of trying things and Spock being like, yep, that's right. Which is not how brain surgery works. Like, even in the far future, that is not how brain surgery works. And then after that, Spock sits up and he's just like, yeah, my hair's not even messed up. We somehow went in and connected all of the nerves between my brain and the inside of my skull, or whatever it is. And, like, there's no surgical scars, there's nothing. Like, his skull just was open. It had to have been open. There's no other physiological way to stick a brain back in there and then do surgery on it. Like, you can't do it without the skull being opened in some way. But apparently they did it. There's no recovery period. Spock's literally just like, yeah, close it up. I'm fine now. What the fuck? It's not how surgery works. Luma is, of course, pissed about this whole turn of events because now her civilization is effectively going to be destroyed. And Kirk's like, don't even worry about it. You'll go up on the surface where it's cold and horrific and ice agey. And, maybe we'll send some dudes and they'll help you figure out how to make a civilization. It's like, no, guy, that's not how this works. Like, you have once again destroyed a civilization for your own purposes. The Prime Directive is clearly not in force here. So, the premise of the episode is basically just bad. The way that it's presented, the way that it's dealt with is basically just bad. it's a subpar episode all around. It's a nonsensical premise. The execution doesn't make that much sense. The resolution creates massive problems that are then just ignored, etc., etc. I don't think there's a massive amount of real strong social justice stuff here, apart from, again, the fact that Kirk has once again destroyed the foundation of a civilization. And we've seen him do this before. In an episode like The Apple, for instance, he just pulls the rug out from under a civilization that, yes, it depends on a machine to help keep it functioning, but the people are happy, and they do not ask Kirk to destroy the machine in that episode. The people in this society actively oppose Kirk taking back Spock's brain. And yes, I guess there's a bottle. So I guess the other element of this is it's not worth downplaying this. This is actually really important, and I don't want to seem like I was dismissing this. There is a bodily autonomy reading to this, right? Where despite the fact that Luma's planet needs Spock's brain in order to function and to maintain themselves as a civilization, that doesn't give them the right to simply take it. In much the same way that reproductive rights supporters would argue that even if a fetus needs a woman's body to gestate, that doesn't inherently mean it has the right to that body if the woman does not consent to it. It's not entirely clear that Spock doesn't consent to being a disembodied brain, but he wasn't asked ahead of time. Like, once he's in there, he seems reasonably chipper about the whole situation, but Luma definitely took his brain without asking his permission. And so there definitely is that reproductive rights angle and that question of bodily autonomy. And I think I've said this before in this series, maybe I've said this in other contexts. The right, in my opinion, the right to bodily autonomy must be absolute. Because if it's not, then there is no logic that prevents the government, for instance, or some other entity from killing you to harvest your organs. And I think that's a bad turn of events for society at large. So there's that element of it. This is in tension with, again, the whole Kirk has decided to destroy this civilization. And yes, you can offer them an alternative that is harsh and unpleasant and likely going to be physically and psychologically detrimental to them. But you are nonetheless destroying the foundation of their civilization. And so there's a colonialist aspect to this because, again, this is part of what colonialism does. And maybe the prime example of this is India. Because when the British started colonizing India, India was a reasonably advanced civilization. Depending on what source you look at, there are even people who argue that it was more technologically and industrially advanced than Britain at the time. And Britain destroyed that infrastructure in order to turn India back into an agricultural society, to export raw goods back to Britain to be processed, and then finished products to be sold to India. So, again, this whole idea of, like, we will destroy your civilization and give you a worse alternative is incredibly problematic. And it happens over and over and over in Star Trek, with Kirk doing this repeatedly.